it's wild, the mechanics of intelligence and higher consciousness in life. And so this will address, like, where are the aliens? Where are all the other higher consciousness beings? Where's all the things in the universe, right? And it works kind of exactly how you see polarity working in general, right? So if you have two things that aren't very different, they don't really interact with each other, but they're all like things that are the same kind of naturally grouped together in a non-polarizing way, you know, and that's what we would call kind of gravity, right? The instant that you start to induce charge into something, you get an attraction. So things are attracted to their opposites, or like any sort of charge separation, there's kind of a slight draw. As you increase that, like, so as things get more and more different in charge, the situation starts to get a little weird. There can be repulsive forces, and there's things that actually keep the charges away from each other. They start to spiral. It's like the charge separation itself becomes alive. And in this you get the behavior of everything from like stars to galaxies to tornadoes and all these other things, of like there's this massive charge difference between like the upper atmosphere and the lower atmosphere. Does it just do this, right? Does all the charge just do this once you get a lot of charge buildup? No. There's some sort of mechanic that as the charge starts to flow, there's other angles involved. The resistance itself is alive. Like the resistive medium between positive and negative is as much of a factor or is as alive as anything else you see. And I would say that's where you're going to find life, or that other world. The thing that you call like the resistive medium between positive and negative, as positive and negative gets greater and greater, that resistive medium also gets greater and greater, and it gets greater and greater intelligence. And so as positive and negative wants to go together, it wants to stay alive. Like the medium wants to stay alive, and that's where you get all of the tendency of things to vortex, right? So the resistive medium, it's the medium between positive and negative, so it never pushes towards positive or negative. The resistive medium cannot push towards positive and negative. But what it can do is push sideways, and that's where you get this right-hand rule of electromagnetism, where the current is flowing that way, and you'll see there's a magnetic field going that way as the current flows. The resistive medium just is consciousness, is sentience, and so the larger the polarity, the more that consciousness and sentience is. And so its survival instinct to stay alive is a push, not towards positive, not towards negative, but sideways, away from it. Also pointing not even in the same dimension, like pointing in the exact opposite of positive and negative. Like, where does the magnetic field pop up in a circuit? Where is it between the positive and the negative part of the battery? It's actually in a different dimension everywhere but the wire and the circuit and the battery, right? The electromagnetic field is almost everything but. So it's in another dimension, and it's involving everything other than that thing right there. And so that's where you get this magnetic field, and that's electromagnetism. And so the more it gets, the more interesting that counter movement goes. So you get everything from hurricanes, vortices, plasma membrane double layers, different types of vibration, stars. Like there's an energy, like the output of a star, right? There's some sort of energy there that's trying to get to another polarity. Something's going on where the charge difference is so much that energy is wanting to be expressed. It doesn't just express all at once, of course, unless the thing dies. Right, so the reason that super intelligent beings are separated from less intelligence beings because intelligence is a polarity. At a low polarity, you don't notice it. At a little bit higher polarity, there's an attractive force, and just even if two things are like stuck together, imagine like intelligence, like, you know, pulls you towards something. There's desire to stay on balance, and so you would pull back, and then that's the intelligence between the thing. It's kind of like the resistance to an idea, but as you scale up and you go to, like, say, the charge difference that you see between the ground and the upper atmosphere, you start to get effects like hurricanes when the energy is dealt with that medium. So that's what's between you and somebody drastically smarter than you. Like, wherever you are, if you're trying to get to some drastically higher intelligence situation, you have to traverse the insanity that lies between those two poles. So there's like a journey. You can't, if anything's easy, it's like lower levels of magnetism, but as if you're trying to really, you know, go, you get massively more complex terrain and forces separating those two poles, right? But because to have real stupid and real smart, like as a pole, just like to have very negative and very positive, having very like, which is something like the charge differential between like the sun and whatever's going on right here. There's some sort of circuit taking place. That's why the energy is flowing along this circuit. And like the layer of the sun, the space, the electromagnetic field as it goes through my body, like all of these things are a barrier to that positive and that negative being eradicated instantly. Like the resistance of the medium is that which creates time. So to get really big differences, right? If positive, like expressed slowly, right? If positive just gradually increases to negative, no one will ever know about it. Like nobody knows. But if you want to go from negative to positive quickly, like faster than time, which is what you would say learning is. Learning is when I'm absorbing information faster than time. So if you want to absorb a lot of information, if you want to go from real stupid to I know the secrets of the universe, you have to go through the complexity of the magnetic field that supports that separation, which starts to look like basically fractal vortices, because it's just the right hand rule pushing on the right hand rule pushing on the right hand rule, and it wants to stay alive. The right hand rule, that sideways push, that I don't want this to reach completion, I don't want positive to go to negative, I'm gonna make resistance. That sideways pushing causes the event to just drag on everything else. Like this, in the way that these things couple together, the way that the magnetic field couples to the circuits or to the wires, is that dragging is how we link things like rivers and fires and stuff to the electrical grid. We have things create steam, which drives turbines, which moves magnets, which moves these electrical fields, which drags and uses this sideways interactive force, magnetism, to cause the electricity, which spins the blender. And so that magnetic field, that right hand rule, that invisible thing between the things, is the life, is the thing creating the things. Positive and negative are created because of the space. The greater positive and negative get, the crazier the space gets. Because the increased polarity gives the space increased intelligence. So it's not just a linear big things pull apart. It's like as that charge increases, then the space gets whatever, but it's equal. You know, it can't slow it down necessarily, but it kind of, like, the amount of sideways direction creates a lot of time. The amount of that sideways pushing as positive and negative wants to flow. The resistance is the attempt to drag on everything else in existence to slow the event down. The magnetic field is sort of that reaching out. That's the breath. Because that is life. Breath is that magnetic field opening positive and negative. And then people get confused and they worship positive and negative coming together. That's the search of power, the event, the experience, the identification with the thing, the form, etc. So you have to be determined to level up. You have to be determined to learn faster than time. You have to go on the journey, because it's the journey that separates positive and negative. There's no shortcut. Like people doing the shortcuts, I was realizing, you know, you can say all this stuff in a single, like, boom, but there's no shortcuts. You could study this stuff forever. It's just an infinite field of all-encompassing principalities, right? The spiritual realm, anything that you learn has infinite application and touches upon every single mystery. So imagine doing that. Like, when you first reach the spiritual realm, you have that, oh, this is everything. It explains everything. Because that's how the spiritual realm is. Principalities have no form. They have no body. So the first time that you adopt a principality, the first time that you're taken up into a principality, into the spiritual realm, you have this spiritual experience of, like, oh, I'm one with everything. No matter what the principality is, the angel, these are angels, right? No matter what God or what deity that you are taken up into the spiritual realm with, that spiritual experience of oneness is the same thing, because there's no body, right? And so if you stay in the spiritual realm long enough, you start to see that there's infinite principalities and they all touch on anything. So as you learn in this realm, every single day, every single class, every single motion will have the most profound impact on you, to the same degree as your first initiation into the spiritual realm. It touches on everything. It explains everything. It has ultimate power over all things and all beings. That's how all principalities are. And so then you have to normalize to that experience, somewhat. But there's a huge journey, there's a huge distance, there's a huge separation between things of drastically different polarity. So if you're ever wanting to, like, crazy level up your consciousness, you have to make that journey. You have to go to Mount Athos. You have to do the pilgrimage. You have to do the training camps. You have to visit the teachers. You have to visit the sites, because it's the journey that creates and separates that energy. It's the journey itself that makes you're the life between those things, right? You're not the student or the guru. You're the distance between the two. What's the largest journey that you've made, or whatever? That's the polarity. That's the charge. So the greatest things are far away. They're on the mountains. They're on the islands. They're on the hilltops. They're sequestered away. There's no way around it. Like, you cannot be a worldly monk. Your monasticism is the difference between the world and your life. not, it's, so the difference, the oddity, the change, right? The amount of change between the individual and the whatever creates the dramaticness of the experience, the cultural shock. Like, how different was the East from the West? That created this larger God, right? When the East and the West was separated. But when people bridged the East and the West, the polarity, so the magnetic field between those things collapsed. That causes those higher gods to collapse, right? So this is the breath, this is the in and out. So as there's an exhale, these different less nested fractal like magnetic fields between the polarities, right? As the polarities come together, the field collapses, so the life pulls away, and so that field is like a god over those two things. There's always a god over between the polarities. Because if there's polarities, there's something holding the polarities open. There's a space between the polarities. There's time and there is space between the two polarities. So, like, if you're trying to look for aliens or extra life or things drastically different from you, there's sideways forces, there's interdimensional forces that's there resisting that contact, right? To see aliens drastically differently than you, there's going to be increasingly strange and sideways and squirrely things between you and those other people, no matter what. So if you start to walk in the direction of aliens, you're going to have strange sideways like magnetic fields walking between you and that polarity of life. Like if human is one polarity, not human is another polarity. To see that, then the magnetic field gets increasingly complex, just like the magnetic field between just a positive and negative iron magnet. It's just very simple, right? But when you look at the difference between the positive and negative of the ground and the sky, it looks like the whole environment. If you look at the difference between the Earth's polarity and the sun, the space holding that positive and negative together starts to look as complex as the entire Earth. It starts to look as complex as the entire solar system. So the terrain or the space between you and hyper-intelligent life starts to look like really, really weird. And that's this same principle happens between, like, let's say power. Let's say you want power. So if you start to look at the difference between you and high power, there's a charge difference there. And so there's a space there, and then that space is increasingly complex and it wants to survive. So on your way to power, you get pushed sideways, not by power itself. Like, power itself is actually pulling you towards it. The thing that's causing you to not have power is that spatial direction. So people like, if people start moving or wake up or start moving in this stuff, as you breathe in and out of existence, like these strange conspiracies, these mythologies, these metaphysics spring into being. As you breathe through existence. But anyway, I'm just saying, so it just makes it hard. It's the reason that the world isn't any more complex than you think it is just because you haven't tried. When you try, it gets crazy sideways and everyone fails. Everyone, when they go in a direction, you kind of fail when you go directly, because this sideways force, that sideways force is basically your survival instinct. So your survival instinct is working against you as long as your breath is identified with the material world. Like, if you're not identified with your actual breath, which is like the space between positive and negative, if you think that you are one of the things trying to get from positive to negative, then your actual life, which is the resistance of time, right? You're pushing back against things instantaneously. This life, this moment, is you pushing back against infinity. That would be over like that. So you're always pushing. Like, if you think your goal is to get somewhere, you're always pushing yourself sideways, and so it looks like you're sabotaging, and the resistance isn't coming from the distance to anything or anything else. It's just you're trying to relax, you're trying to chill out, you're trying to not die, you're trying to prolong eternity so that you can live. And everybody has a survival instinct that's strong. So you're always fighting yourself if you're trying to go somewhere. So when people seek power, they seek like the... Is this where I go? I think this is where I go. I should probably look at my GPS. No, this is not where I go. Oh, crap.